What's going on, guys? Thank you for clicking on this video. So on this video, I'm actually going to react to a video from Jubilee. It's a series they have on there that's also called Middle Ground, and it's where they bring in two different people on the opposite sides of a particular argument, and they try to find common ground on that topic. On this particular video, though, one of the questions was trans women should compete in women's sports. Should trans women compete in women's sports? So that's the part of the video that I want to react to. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Trans women should be allowed to compete in women's sports.
I do think that trans women have every right to compete in women's sports. When trans women are on hormones, the hormones break their body down. Having gender-affirming surgery breaks down the body. And so I think we really need to be educated before we jump to a conclusion that trans women are stronger than cis women in sports.
And so you see this transgender woman's opinion on it, and it's very common from people on her side to have that viewpoint. And none of the viewpoints, though, unfortunately for them, is rooted in facts. There's nothing factual about what she just said. As a matter of fact, there's so many research out there to the contrary of what she said. But what most people on her side, they don't listen to those facts. They don't pay attention to it because for some reason, they get triggered when you start to actually preach about facts. So yeah.
Hi, everybody.
I find it interesting that you assume the people who disagree with you are uneducated, and I will speak out against that. I think the research shows that trans women do happen to have a biological advantage against biological women. Even though you are taking hormones, and that does start to change your body and level things out, we're talking about primarily people who have transitioned post-puberty, which means they do have male bone density, male wingspan, male hand size, feet size, lung capacity. All of these things are going against women, biological women, when trans women start to enter their spaces, their sports, and compete against them. And this is really concerning for me.
I think for me...
Now, everything that she just said is completely factual. And put it this way, if LeBron James decided today, I identify as a woman, trans woman, and then let's say let's say LeBron James goes through a year of hormone therapy, which is what's required for a lot of leagues. LeBron James would be the greatest women's basketball player that has ever stepped foot on this earth. LeBron James would go into WNBA and instantly be the tallest player, the strongest, the fastest. It wouldn't even be fair. And sure, could LeBron James lose some muscle mass? Sure. But that's not going to change biology. That man's hands is still probably triple the size of the average woman in the WNBA. And it wouldn't even be fair.
It's not a question of whether or not trans women can compete in sports. It's a question of how can we change the institution of sports in this country to make it equitable and to create more opportunity for cis women, for trans women. And that's kind of why I wanted to actually ask you all, what is your relationship to sports been?
I don't think you have to have a direct relationship to sports to realize that women are being affected by this issue, and I do reject the idea of equity. There is no way to come about an equality of outcome, which is what equity is saying. There's a reason that women's sports are less funded and less watched than men's sports. It's because men seem to excel athletically, and they seem to press the bounds of athleticism way farther than women do. We now exist on a slippery...
Wow, this woman right here is completely based. Everything she's saying is no feelings involved, all factual, all things that you can see. And there really shouldn't be any argument here, but I get the feeling that there's going to be certain people on this panel that's going to be in their feelings.
slope. If it's female sports, is it then female locker rooms? Is it then female prisons, which we're now seeing becoming an issue here in California, where biological male inmates are being put in female facilities because they identify as women? We have to discuss as a society how much we give into the feelings of wanting everybody to be accepted and how much we are willing to do that at the expense of biological women.
I use myself as an example. This is about how big I was in junior high school and early high school. I used to be able to walk up to a V8 engine block, pick it up off the floor, and set it on a table. And if I was in powerlifting or weightlifting, that amount of, that advantage was just unbelievable. I've been on hormones for 15 years. Did it weaken me? Absolutely. Did my bone density really hasn't changed? My muscular hasn't changed? And this is not a binary question. There's a lot of nuances involved.
I just want to ask a question for what you were.
Wait, let's go back to what the other transgender woman said. Bone density of her body did not change very much. In fact, she's talking about lifting some big ass blocks. Like, I know what he's talking about. Those things are fucking heavy. And like, no amount of hormone therapy is going to negate biology, right? Biology always wins, but saying that is, and what I just said can get you canceled. And it's sad because what I just said is factual.
Saying, can you throw out some statistics?
I don't think you need to have so there's an abundance of research. There's even trans activists who agree with exactly what I'm saying. And your hormones can change, right? And even she just spoke to the fact that her bone density did not change in going on hormones and changing these things. And we can see it in sports as we're watching them. Leah Thomas is a great example.
So if you can't throw out the statistics, we're not doing enough of the work. And let's also be clear.
That sentence you just said actually made no sense. If you're not throwing out statistics, that means we're not doing enough of the work. There are plenty of research out there, and it might be anecdotal, but there's anecdotal evidence right there on the panel of someone saying they took hormone blockers and it didn't do anything. It did little to nothing. So this person, even if she was able to throw out statistics, the other transgender woman ain't trying to hear it. She is all in her feelings. Anything that disagrees with anything that has to do with trans or LGBTQA, anything that speaks out against it, you will immediately get backlash. And kudos to this woman for sticking to her shit.
There are some cisgender women who produce high levels of testosterone as well. And so we really have to unpack it from all different sides here.
Can you produce statistics about the bone density of biological men and how it changes upon being on hormones and whether or not it levels out to biological women?
Hell no, she can't. Hell no, she can't.
I cannot, because when I would think of those statistics, I would think it was BS, to be quite honest with you.
What? She can't think of this. She can't come up with the statistics because if there was statistics out there, she would think it's BS. If that's not the complete definition of like these people being woke, like you give them statistics that go against their viewpoint, oh, it's BS. Oh, I'm triggered. It's BS. It's not a real study. Blah 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 blah.
Because the reality of it is we could talk about statistics and the research all day long, but it's about experience. We're going to be looking more at the experience because, again, when we look at cisgender women who produce high levels of testosterone and who have been kicked out of sports and been disqualified from teams based on something that they biologically cannot control, then what are we really talking about here?
Well, we're talking.
So I know the instance she's talking about. She's talking about the one college woman who I believe could not compete. I think it was track and field. She could not compete because her testosterone levels were significantly higher than the women she was competing against. That is completely anecdotal. Rarely happens, but it did happen. That's only the one time I can think about it. And I'm very tuned in on athletics and sports. That's the one instance I can think of where a woman had too much testosterone and got disqualified.
About, I mean, data and that is overwhelming. And we're talking about what is also we're capable of seeing with our human eyes. I think it's very clear that if you compare maybe you to the rest of us, there is going to be a strength difference. There's going to be a bone density difference.
But you're just saying that you don't know until we physically do something.
Oh, see, now she is definitely triggered. You look at this picture right here. Who the hell? Take out the dude in the back. I'm sorry, the transgender woman in the back. This black chick. Do you guys really think these three women on the right are stronger than this big, broad shoulder ass dude? Come on, man. Now she's just in her feelings.
And just perceiving and assuming just because I look a certain way, that's not fair. Me and her we could look completely different or whatever, but she may be stronger than me.
I agree, but
she have much more agility and vitality than I do. We don't know that until you actually do it.
I'm saying that it has been studied, it's been done.
And it's been done, we've seen it numerous
times, time and time again. But we're only going on assumption at this point. Because again,
it's not assumption when we see it. Maybe it's the news cycle that I watch, but
You see, that's exactly what I'm saying. They are literally telling her, hey, this is what is happening. This is out there. And she is really not trying to hear it.
I see it a lot. I see it quite often where they're showing trans women beating. I mean, I'm by far.
And you don't see women dominating in the men's sports, right? You don't see trans men going into men's sport and just completely dominating and wiping the field with them.
Oh, she just got her with that comment. You really don't. You don't see transgender men fighting for trying to compete in men's sports. Because I tell you this, men's sports, I mean, because they just let them play. Like, okay, if you think you're good enough to come in the league, come play. Like, I would love to see Brittany Griner play in the NBA. Let's say Brittany Griner comes out and be like, oh, I identify as a man. I think the NBA would openly allow Brittany Griner to come into the league, and she would get completely embarrassed. By NBA standards, I guess she's like, what, 6'7"? So she'd be like a small forward. she would get torched. But because it's just a skill level. But again, either way, you never see that.
You, in my opinion, twist God's design. And when you go against God's design, you create these problems that you wouldn't have if you weren't going against what God intended.
I'm going to take her side a little bit on that. And let me say one more thing, and I'm supporting you on this one. There's a great deal of women that, and actually there was a lady in the last Olympics that they actually disqualified until she went on androgen blockers to knock her testosterone down to a female level. Like I said,
I think that's the one I was just talking about. Okay, I thought it was a college chick, but yeah, there was a chick that had too much testosterone, and she got disqualified.
Not a binary yes or no question, and the whole idea of messing with what God puts up, God put me up. Okay, if you want to take that, and I had this conversation with a very religious man in San Diego, and he was like, "Oh, I don't quite know how to deal with that."
And God made you that way. But he didn't make a lot of the people transitioning.
I understand.
No, but God also understands my transition. God, first of all, knew what I was going to be in my life. God already knew I was going to be trans when God put me here. So I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair when people dip and dab. Your relationship with God is personal.
Yes.
It's sacred.
Let's
and
keep
I
it
don't
there.
think it's fair when other people dib and dab in other people's relationship with God when they don't understand what they.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is completely diverting from the prompt, the question, should trans women compete in sports? I don't want to talk about anything that's to do with God as far as this trans woman stuff, but yeah, I think they're kind of getting away from the point.
Go through. God still blesses me as a trans woman. God blesses you as a cisgendered woman. God is embodied in me as a trans person. I don't think it's fair, again, when we judge people's personal relationship with God. Gender identity, sexual orientation, none of that matters to a God that loves all.
Gender dysphoria is real.
So yeah, that was pretty much the video, the part of the video that I wanted to show. Like I said, I have my opinions on it. I don't think trans women should compete in women's sports, because it just takes away opportunities from women. You know, women's participation in sports is already pretty low. Yeah, it's growing, but it's already pretty low. And, you know, these high school girls and college girls who are getting, you know, cut from basketball teams or any sports teams are not getting scholarships because those opportunities are now given to a trans woman. I think it just hurts women in the end. You know, and I understand people want to be fair and all that stuff. What would be fair is to let this transgender community have their own space. And I don't actually think there's anything wrong with saying that. And I think a lot of people would agree with me. So yeah, that's my opinion. I'm curious to know what you guys' opinions are. So go ahead and share your comments. If you like the video, please do me a solid, subscribe to the channel, and also like the video. Y'all have a good one.